Okay.
Tell me if we're in YouTube. I think we're getting there.
Let's check.
And on the screen is the Chumash.
No.
What's on the screen? Oh, it's me, a picture of me, right? Oh, okay. Yes, it's going to. Okay, how do I get back from? Okay. Mendel?
Yeah.
How do I get into Zoom? Back to Zoom?
Here.
Click it.
Wait, here, what's this?
Ah, okay.
You want to share your screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then do.
Okay. Parsha. Study. Okay, now you see it?
Yes. You might want to select a co-host in case people.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that's a good idea. Done. Okay. Okay, folks, welcome. Chumash and Rashi, new Parsha. Parsha is Bahar. We are beginning with let's get right into it. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe, and Hashem spoke to Moshe, Bahar Sinai, at Mount Sinai Lamor, saying, so the obvious question is, why is it saying Har Sinai? You know, we've been at Har Sinai seemingly this whole time. We haven't traveled. Actually, it'll only be in the book of Bamidbar, the desert, and there'll be the traveling. But right now, they're Mount Sinai. They're there almost a year. So the fact that Moshe was spoken to by God by Har Sinai is something that we know. So Rashi picks up on that. It says the Har Sinai, Ma inyan Shmita Eitzel Har Sinai. What's the now this parsha, the beginning of the parsha, is speaking about the sabbatical year, meaning the seventh year that the land needs to go, that the land, all the land in Israel, goes fallow, right? Not allowed to plant on the land, and it's considered that it's ownerless, owned by God, but not owned by the individual during that year. So Rashi says, why is the idea of Shemitah, the sabbatical year, what has it got to do with Mount Sinai? The fact that we emphasize here Mount Sinai, Allah call them Sinai, isn't all the commandments set at Sinai? And that's where we got our marching orders. So why is this specified? So just like we're going to go now into the sabbatical year, and it's going to go into a lot of detail. All the generalities and all the details are said at Sinai. So likewise, all of the mitzvahs, even though all the mitzvahs were not given in the Torah with specification, maybe just the generalization of them were, but all the general rules and the detailed rules were told at Sinai. Now this is to teach us that all of the Torah, right, that were all the even though here we go into greater detail than in other mitzvahs, and therefore you might think, well, maybe only the generalities were given at Sinai. No, just as this was given, the generalities and the specifications at Sinai, so likewise all the mitzvahs. So we learn in the Midrash Teretz Kahanim, right? Nira Lishikaf Perusha. Second. Aha. So this is the way Torah's Kahanim, the Midrash explains it, right? In others, he's quoting from there, right? So nearly Kafir, it appears to me that this is the explanation. In others, what's the question over here? Because we will see that the details are not actually specified right here, they're specified later. So since we don't find that the laws of the sabbatical year are not, they're not repeated in Mishnah Torah, meaning in the book of Dvarim, the book of Deuteronomy, which means a book of repetition. It's not repeated there. So we might infer that the rules and the details. So, since there's, in other words, since they're not repeated over there, so we're going to infer that all the details, which means, by the way, the last 40 days of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, meaning if it wasn't repeated there, that must mean, therefore, so from that we learn, so therefore we have to infer from that all the rules and its details were said at Sinai because it wasn't repeated. Maybe, in other words, maybe it was not said at Sinai. Maybe it was only said later on and in Arbas Moab, on the plains of Moab, before Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. So Baal Kosvalim Khan called Ibn Shani by Moshe, Shemin Sinai Kulam, that everything that Moshe had spoken was from Sinai. So our verse is going to teach us regarding every commandment that was spoken to Moshe, that they were all stated in Moshe, including the rules and their details, their general, right? And they were repeated again at the plains of Moab. In other words, the general principles and the details. That's how he's understanding it. In other words, the fact that it's not repeated means that it had to be said then at Sinai. Okay. Verse number 2. Daber of Israel, and speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, and when you will come to the land that I am giving to you, and you shall rest the land as Shabbos to Hashem. Rashi, what does it mean? A Shabbos la Hashem, that it's a rest for Hashem. Right. Rashi says, L'shem Hashem. What does it mean for God? I mean, it's got to be dedicated to God, right? The land is resting for God. What does it mean it's resting? It means you have to dedicate it to God. Just as it says regarding the Shabbos of creation, that we do it for Hashem. So like every 7 days we do that, all right? For the sake of Hashem. Verse number 3, continues, 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune the vineyard, and you gather in it all of its produce for 6 years. Verse number 4, in the 7th year, Shabbos and Iyalaris, it will be a complete rest for the land. Shabbos Hashem. A Shabbos for Hashem, a Sabbath for Hashem. What does that mean? It means your field you shall not sow, and you shall not prune your vineyard. Rashi, Alaris, Masadas Kramim. What does it mean for the land? It means for the fields and the vineyards. In other words, for agricultural purposes, it's forbidden, right? To dig pits, to create cisterns and that kind of stuff. That's permitted. What does it mean not to prune? It means you should not cut down its branches. And the term Gumay and Uncle is translated loy sach, do not cut off. And there's similar examples of this. That means to cut down the thorns in Isaiah. Burnt in a fire and cut down, that we have in Tehillim. I was just showing an example of where it means to cut. As Sviach Kitzircha Loisikzor, verse number 5, and you shall not reap its aftergrowth, and after it grows, don't reap it. Of its harvest. Those things are going to grow naturally, right? So you can't reap it. You can't sow. That means that effort of what you sowed, right? You're leaving the land to rest, so you can't sow. But maybe things are going to run wild, right? So the verse says, "Lo so you can't harvest it." And shouldn't pick up the grapes that have grown. It should be a year of rest for the land. Verse number 5 in Rashi. And the crops that grew on their own. Sviach is sort of like wild growth. Even if you did not sow the land, and something grew because of the seed that fell at the time of harvesting. Because when you harvested the year before, some seeds might have fallen and it might have grown wildly as a result. And that's called Safiach. You should not harvest it. That you keep it exclusively for yourself, like any other form of harvest. But it's going to be hefker, meaning it's free for all. It's a free for all, meaning anybody can come and take it. It's not as if you own the land at that time in the 7th year. The zircha means that you have bared, that you separated. And you separated other people from them and have not made it hefker. Nor pick it up. So you're not allowed to pick it up. In other words, in a way that you're having ownership over the produce, but you can take it from hefker, that it's free for all, meaning you can also take, but in such a manner. Verse number 6. And it will be a Sabbath of the land for you, that you shall eat for you, and for your servants, and for your male servant, and for those hired workers, and for the resident who lives with you. Rashi in 6. And the land will have a rest period for you. Even though this produce is forbidden for you. I didn't make it forbidden to eat it or to benefit from it. But you should not act with it as if you're the owner. It's not that you can't eat the produce. You could eat it, but you can't act as if you're the owner. but rather everybody's going to be equal in regard to the food. Your hired worker, your resident who lives with you, they're all equal. Shabbos haaretz lachem lachla. It'll be a land with the rest for yours for eating. Mina shvus ata echel. From that which rested you can eat. Yata echel mina shomer. But you can't eat from that which is guarded. So the previous verse said that it's prohibited harvesting and picking produce that was kept aside. This verse adds that such produce is also forbidden to be eaten because you're not equal with it. You're showing your ownership over it. For you, your servant, and your maidservant, so since it says that the desume among you, your people shall eat. So Yochel, I might think that they should be prohibited for rich people to eat. As we learned earlier in the book of Shmois of the book of Exodus, we learned there the principle of the destitute get to eat and not people who have. That I think that I have to look up the verse. I think that that's referring to giving to the poor. So you might think here also the poor will get a preference, right? But the verse says otherwise. That is for you, for your servant, and your maidservant. Meaning it's for the owner. Lacha is the owner, right? The servant and the maidservant. Everybody's mentioned here. In other words, you'll get an equal opportunity. There's some musical background over here. So this is also non-Jews. Your hired worker and the resident. Okay, verse 7. Oh, we have a very vocal student over here. She's taking it all in. Taking it all in. I think it's the first time she's singing her Zadie teach. Oh no, maybe her mother shows her on the screen. And all of and for your animals, that's the verse continues. The animals and your wild and domesticated and wild beasts. Amen. That is in your land, would be for them all of this produce to be eaten. And others, they also get equal opportunity here between the owner of the land, those in the household, servants, those are hired work that are either not Jewish or a stranger in the land, and now animals too. If a wild beast eats, then a domesticated animal, all the more so would be able to. Because the domesticated animal, you're responsible for their feed if they belong to you. So why does the verse have to say? Just say wild beasts, and all the more so for domesticated animals. Why? Because it wants to make something comparable between them. Since it's mentioning both of them, so there's something that both of them have an equality. That the entire time that the wild beast will eat this kind of produce from the field, you may give your animal to eat from this kind of produce from the house. Right. But if this kind of produce is ended for the wild beast, So then for the animal, also from the home, they can't get it anymore. In other words, there's an equality between them. A wild beast, no, you're not giving them from the field. So if the wild beast no longer has food from the field because it's all finished, so you can't feed now your animal, your domesticated animal, from the home, right? Belonging to you. So verse number 8. Good, folks? Over here. Finish off. This every Shabbat says, and you should count for yourself 7 sabbatical years. Shanim, 7 sabbatical years. Sheva Shanim, 7 times. Sheva Pamim, 7. Sheva Pamim, 7 times. And the amount will be 49 years for you. Rashi in 8. Shabbos is Shanim, Shemitah is Shanim. In other words, a sabbatical year, the land is fallow for 7 times, 7 years. So I might think that this means that one should make 7 consecutive Shemitahs, fallow years, and then make the Jubilee year, because we're going into the Jubilee, this 50th year. However, the Torah teaches us otherwise. 7 years, 7 times. Meaning every Shemitah, every 7th year is its appropriate time. I would think otherwise. Because it says Shabbos is Shabbos. 7 years. So you might think 7 consecutive years, yeah, from that language, but the first thing modifies that. And therefore, it'll be a period of 7 that will total for you. Magi Lacha, this tells you. That even if you did not make the sabbatical years, right? I said, you still have to make, after 49 years, the Jubilee years. Let's say you didn't count the sabbatical years for whatever reason, right? It doesn't take away from the Jubilee year. If you didn't, let's say you didn't count for whatever reason, a 7-year period. So a Jubilee year still will be the Jubilee after the 49 years. But the straightforward meaning of this verse is straightforward meaning of the verse is the total of Shemitah year cycles will add up to 49. Verse 9. And you shall proclaim with our shofar blast in the 7th month. On the 10th day, on the 10th day of the month, which is the day of atonement, you shall sound the blast of the shofar throughout the land. Excuse me. So the word abarta over here means they should announce him in the camp. It's an expression of a proclamation. Yom Kippur, on the Day of Atonement. So if it says Yom Kippur, don't I know it's the 10th of the month? Why does it have to say 10th of the month and Yom Kippur? If it says 10th of the month, I know it's Yom Kippur. If it says Yom Kippur, I know it's Yom Kippur. You don't need to say both. Why is it say 10th of the month? But to tell you, to tell you that the blast of the shofar on the 10th of the month pushes away Shabbos in all of the land. So on Yom Kippur, it It pushes away Shabbos and you can blow on Shabbos. But Rosh Hashanah, you can't blow the shofar in the land. Only in Jerusalem, in the Holy Temple, where the high court is. There you could. Vikidashtem, and you shall sanctify Shnasa Chamishim, Shana, the 50th year, Vikrasim Dor Ba'aretz. This is in the Proclamation of Independence, I think, of America. This last verse in this verse, or this verse, I think it's, if I recall. So you make a proclamation of freedom from slaves. Ba'aretz, in the land, Chol Yeshveha, to all of its inhabitants. Yevel hi tia lachem. Jubilee year it shall be for you, the 50th year. And you shall return each man to his property, and shall return each man to his family. Let's see Rashi. Rashi in 10, Mikidashtem, you shall sanctify the Knesses and Mikachim, as if based in. What does it mean you should sanctify? It means at the beginning of the year, the court of law, based in, has to declare its holiness. In other words, it's not just something that happens, even though it does happen on its own by the fact that it's the 10th of the month. It's the 50th year, but it needs to be proclaimed as such by the court of law. And we say that the year is sanctified. The court declares its sanctification. And you shall proclaim freedom. Who's the freedom? For slaves. So this is speaking about for servants, whether their ears have been pierced or not, whether 6 years of servitude. Okay, sorry. So for the servants, being near to whether the person had a pierced ear because they stayed on after 6 years, or 6 years is not finished because after 6 years, a slave goes free, right? Let's say it's in the 3rd year, still go free because of the Jubilee year. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, that's according to Rabbi Yehuda. Malashan drawer. What is this language drawer? It's an unusual term that we haven't had till now. So it's like the term, like a person who dwells in an inn. And this is going to show me. He dwells wherever he wants. It's not under the authority of others. Okay, Yovel, it's a Jubilee year. Shana Zayis Magdalas Mishar Shana. This year is distinguished from all other years. The Kivas Shem La Levada, that has a unique name for itself. Mashma, what's its name? Yovel Shema. It's Yovel Jubilee. Al Shem Tkiya Shofar, because of the blast of the shofar. A shofar is called a Yovel. So you see in the book of Joshua. And each person should return to its inherited property. As we will learn later, as the fields, not today, the fields return to their original owners. The rabbis is on Yitzhak. A man shall return to his family. This includes a servant who had pierced ear, also returns. Verse 11. It's a jubilee year. It shall be the 50th year, which shall be for you. You shall not sow, and you shall not plant, you shall not harvest the aftergrowth, reap the aftergrowth. That's the aftergrowth. And you shall not set aside for yourself. Rashi, right? So the 50th year is like the 7th year, the sabbatical year. Same idea. Why does it say Shinema? We already said this, right? So it's being redundant. Since it's sanctified, since it says sanctified, right? So I might think that it's beginning of the year, it rains sanctified progressively. Then you should sanctify the extent after the year, as it is with the instant sanctification of holy things. Shabbos all the year. Tana extension, it is like one time becomes holy. Okay. That's Israel and that which is set aside. As Hanabim Shumarim, those were that you set aside, food for yourself, right? But you could gather from that which is declared hefker, which is ownerless. Just like we say by the sabbatical 7th year, that you have the right, just like anybody else. You just can't show your ownership over it, but you could take. Similarly, is by the Jubilee 50th year. So we have 2 holy years, one next to the other. Shas Harbaim B'Teisha, the 49th year, Shemitah is the sabbatical year, Shas Chamishim Yovel, and the 50th year, the Jubilee year. Verse number 12. Because it is a Jubilee year, it's going to be holy for you. From the field you shall eat its produce. So it's saying, what's Rashi adding over here? Rashi in 12. So it's sanctity embraces money exchange for it to be in the same way the holy property does. So it's repeating it over that when you will the money exchange. It means like this. Usually, a holy means for like a holy occasion, like a holiday, right? So, what's holy over here? I mean, it's just food. Why is it holy? Because if you want to bring any of this to Jerusalem, it may be difficult to travel with it. So you can exchange it on money. The money becomes holy, and then that money, you have to redeem its holiness by buying produce in Jerusalem and eating that produce there. Just like, second tithe and so on. That's the reference. So Taisa Demelga, just so the exchange is so Mina Sada Teichlu, From the field you shall eat. Ayidei asada, meaning through the field. Ata eichel min habayis. Right, the field you may eat that which is in your home. She'im kala l'chayis asada min asada ata tzurich levar min habayis. Meaning, you can only eat just like the animal, the domesticated animal. Likewise, you can only eat while there's still food on the field that the wild animals are able to eat from. But then, once there's no more food left on the field, so, because this way you might be hoarding things, right? And we have to make an equal opportunity that everybody can get from the field. So therefore, even though you don't own it, but you're there, you can get first dibs on it much easier. So once there's no more food left on the field for wild animals to have, so whatever you have in your house stored away, right? You have to remove it from the house. As it says by the sabbatical year, the same thing is by the Jubilee year. Last verse. So during the Jubilee year, you shall return each man to his property. Let's see more of that. Tomorrow, Rashi, it should be also each man who has the property of inheritance property shall return. We already said in verse 10, what is this adding over here? That the property goes back to the original inheritor. It comes to include also case when one who sold his field and his son came forward and redeemed it. Make it, nevertheless, goes back to his father in the Jubilee year. Okay. All right, folks.